Welcome to my podcast. My guest today needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway because he'd be very disappointed if he didn't have one. I know him as Jotronic. That's a name that you don't hear very often. I also know him as Joe Tillman. You'll probably know him better as that. And you may know him as the hair transplant mentor. So welcome, Joe Tillman, to my podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here. Great to be here. And I haven't heard the name Jotronic in quite a while. So that was that was actually kind of funny to hear that.
When did you retire, Jotronic, out of interest? What year?
I retired Jotronic when I first left my original clinical tenure at Hasson and Wong after 11 years. Okay. That was my online handle for the better part of over 10 years, about 12 years actually, on the various hair loss discussion and hair transplant discussion forums, the boards. Back in the day, there was like four or five of those. There was no Reddit, I don't think. There was no Facebook hadn't started, none of that. So this is on the discussion boards of the forums. And that was the nickname given to me by a friend of mine before I ever got into this business. That was just a nickname he gave me. He just started calling me Jotronic because, kind of 50s sci-fi relation with the sound of it. I don't know, but that was it. And so I used that. I was very open who I was. I used full face photos and videos when I was sharing images of myself on these forums as Jotronic, and people knew my name was Joe. But then I retired that at the end of 2014, August 2014, when I first left Hasson and Wong and started going just by my name, Joe Tillman.
Okay. Well, we'll get onto that shortly. But so we met probably about 20 years ago, I think, perhaps a little bit more than that, when we were exchanging emails backwards and forwards. And I remember having a discussion on the phone with you before I booked to come and have my repair surgery with Dr. Hasson. Yeah. And that was in 2006. So, but we started our communication before then.
Prior to that,
But let's go a little bit further back to perhaps the people may not know this. I know you're always on. You're on the Bald Truth, and you're offering advice to callers. But I think sometimes people don't actually know the full history of Joe Tillman, what he's been through, because back in the day, if you were around on the forums when I was, then of course you were the original guy who set up a website and documented his journey. I mean, was there anyone doing that prior to you, or were you the innovator, the OG?
There was one guy that had documented his journey, but it wasn't in real time. And it wasn't very comprehensive. It was just a few before images and a few after images, and then he kind of got he got some recognition for it. But he didn't do a pre-op intraoperative photo session and then ongoing post-op photo sessions with updates, much less for weeks, months, and even years after his one or two surgeries. So I was the first person to do what we now call blogging or vlogging with a V. Before that was even a thing. And I was updating in near real time where like weekly, it's like, okay, so, this might be fun to share photos of. I'm on my boat on Lake Washington in Seattle, which is where I was living. This is what my hair looks like on the boat, take a photo and upload it to my website at the time or on the forums. And, the only reason why I had a website, there was no grand design for this to begin with. The only reason why I was doing that to begin with was because my family who lives back east, they were kind of worried. It's like, oh my God, he's going to go through another hair transplant because I had two bad ones before, which I'm sure we'll be getting to. Yeah. But I did that so I could more easily share my progress with them. And then I was part of one of these forums, and I thought, I'll just go ahead and show these guys what's going on. So I put the link out there, and I started getting hit with questions. It's like, whoa, hey, what's going on here? And that just kind of morphed into a motivation for me to be more frequent with my updates, because I immediately recognized how much I enjoyed answering questions and helping other brothers in the struggle, as it were. And it grew. I started getting emails from Japan, Russia, Venezuela, and back in 2002, you're like, I'm getting like people from all these countries are talking to me. Like that was not a normal thing.
Yeah, it was a new concept at the time, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was really strange. It was like the first time I'm being contacted ever in my life from people outside of North America, much less the States. And it's like, wow, this is cool, man. I'm really getting a reach here. And so it was just more motivation, and it became fun. And I started trying to come up with unique ways of sharing. And then I started doing video. There's still a video of me from, I think 2005, after I think my second surgery, where my hair was wet and I towel dried it, and I was showing the results, and towel drying more and then styling it. And
I remember watching it. I remember watching that video.
Yeah.
Because it was how I found that hair transplants had suddenly evolved. I mean, I'd had the 3 hair transplants done similar to you, which we'll get onto in a moment, but I was like, wow. And I remember calling my then wife at the time over to say, look at this guy. And she came over and she went, yeah, he's a good looking guy. And I said, no, look at his hair. She's like, why are you looking at guys on the internet, David?
Yeah, exactly. David, do we need to have a talk?
He's spoken about this before, David. So yeah, that was how I found you. And I suddenly thought, this can't be real. And I immediately thought, and then that led me down the whole of the forums and
and that's the story of a lot of guys, a lot of people that saw my documentation, and it just turned to a situation where, at the time I was in enterprise level IT sales, and I was, on Microsoft campus once a week, and, a little place called Amazon before it got to be big, and, supplying networking equipment and printers and all that good stuff. It was I love the job because I'm kind of a gearhead anyway, tech wise and car wise. But the bottom out of that market dropped. Like the tech bubble burst. That was around late 2002, I think, if I remember correctly. And I switched over to the mortgage business, which I hated. And I found myself sitting on my computer at my office, just talking to guys about hair loss, not doing mortgages, because I hated it. And so, long story short, I realized I need to be in this business because I love talking about this stuff. This is just amazing. And so what I did is I actually compiled, this is about 9 months later, or 10 months after my surgery, I compiled a list of the people I talked to that I knew had actually gone to the clinic. And I said, and I contacted the clinic. I said, hey, we need to talk about me coming to work for you, because this is why. And I had this big long sheet. All these guys came to you because I didn't tell them to go to you, but they came to you because I did. So let's talk. And they're like, come on up. And so, made all the arrangements and, moved to Vancouver, and I was there for 11 years. And
can I just ask, why do you think it was that you enjoyed talking to these patients? Why was there a particular reason that you can think of at the time?
Because I was very passionate about what I went through, about what it did for me, and we can segue into why that is. It's because I was a repair patient. Mm-hmm. Because for the previous 9 years of my adult life, starting from the age of 22, remember correctly, I've been living with not one but 2 bad hair transplants I got in the same year from a doctor in the States, and they were terrible. And it was a situation where the new hairline was placed, but it was placed behind my existing hairline, meaning I still have my hairline.
Thankfully.
And the idea was, as I continued to age, the doctor, I remember this clear as day today. Oh, what's going to happen is your native hairline is going to recede a little bit, and you'll recede into the hairline I've just created for you, or I'm going to create for you. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it did make sense. I mean, logically speaking, but what didn't make sense, or what the reason why it would not have made sense if I knew more about it, is that he's going to cause a lot of shock loss, permanent shock loss from damage from the needles, and the hairs that he was placing into my new hairline to create the new hairline were very pluggy, multi-hair grafts,
Yeah.
you know, 3s, 4s, 5s. And so when that recession continued and reached that point of my surgical hairline, it would start to look pluggy. It would start to look like, as I always say, ant legs on growth hormone. And it looked like that in spades. And just continued getting worse. And just 3 years later, not even, when I was 25, I was a Norwood 4A, meaning I didn't have any of my native hair in the front. I had a pretty strong bridge across the middle of my scalp.
Yeah.
And then I had the formation of a bald spot in my crown, but I still had that hairline. And so from the age of 25, roughly, I was doing the walk of shame, where, you know, to quote Spencer Coburn, the walk of shame, or not, no, that's not his. No, I was a walking wounded. That's his quote. Yeah. Walking wounded. And, it was visible. Like, everyone saw it. Not everyone knew what it was, but it was one of those situations where I couldn't get anyone to look me in the eye when they're talking to me, because they look me in the eye and then they'd look up at my hairline, and they look me in the eye again because they realize that they're looking at my hairline, and then look back at my hairline because they realize they can't stop looking at my hairline, and it'd be back and forth. And it's just, and that was terrible. So
Yeah.
I became passionate about this, to answer your question, because about talking to others about it, is because of what it did for me. And going back to my original documentation, I was in surgery and I'd taken my first washroom break, and I looked at it in the mirror. I'm like, oh my God, this looks amazing, just because everything was so small. And that's when I knew. That's when I knew I needed to start taking pictures. And I brought my camera. I'll never forget it. It was a Fuji Fine Pix. Forgot the model number, but it was 2.1 megapixels. Beautiful little camera.
Yeah.
And
I
even
remember you always being
today,
into your cameras, weren't you? You were always into
yeah,
photography, and you
yeah,
were kind of the guy who invented the standards of how to photograph hair transplants as well, which
yeah.
we'll get onto again. But yeah, sorry, you were saying that
But
you started documenting.
yeah, but that's why.
Yeah,
Um,
of course.
I saw the difference, and then as things started to come through, I realized just how much better it was. And you know, when I went home in a snowstorm, by the way, an hour and a half drive, and an hour and a half, no, a 3 hour drive took 6 hours because there's so much snow. But I'll never forget. I got to the border, and, and I pulled up, and the guy wasn't even looking at me. He's just kind of, you know, looking at my paperwork, and he goes, "What was your business in Canada?" I said, I remember it was kind of like a do or die moment. Do I kind of make up a story, or do I own it? So I turned and looked at him, and I leaned out the window. I was like, "I just got a hair transplant." He's like, "Ooh, okay, go." Just go on by. He didn't want anything to do with it. And so that was also kind of a moment for me where I was able to kind of come out of my shell, because for 9 years I'd been, you know, not hiding under a hat, because no jobs I ever had allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
But I felt better about being visible.
And what years? So what age were you at this? So you had your first hair transplant by about, you had two in the same year at the age of 23. Is that right? And
22.
then
Yeah.
22, 23. And what year was it that you became aware that you were losing your hair? Because there's always a moment usually where something happens and you're like,
Oh,
wow, okay.
oh yeah. I remember that one too. I was 17, and
17. Wow, that's young.
yeah. And I was sitting in the school cafeteria with my friends, and I remember hearing, just off in the distance, it kind of distracted me from, you know, just the general noise in the room. You will, you won't, you won't. And I'm like, what's going on? And it keeps getting closer and closer and louder and louder. And I looked over, and it's someone walking behind, a kid walking behind the other kids in the, you know, sitting in a row, tapping them on their shoulder, or on the back, or on their upper back, saying, you won't, you won't, you won't. And he gets to me and he says, he will, and keeps going. I'm like, whoa, what do you mean I will? He goes, you will be bald. You're losing hair in the back of your head. I'm like, what? Like, that had never even crossed my mind before. And this, being called out in the middle of a cafeteria where there was like, a few hundred other kids. No one laughed about it. No one paid attention to what this guy did, but I did. And wow, that was like, it's like being hit with something that you never realized would happen to you, and you never thought about it happening to you. It was very surreal. I'll never forget that. But it did lessen, because and what I mean by lessen, the impact of that was reduced with time, because I don't see my crown. And this is very common with a lot of guys with hair loss that do have crown loss, but not so much frontal hairline loss. Is they don't notice it, they don't see it, so it doesn't really affect them. And I understand that. Other guys just not knowing drives them nuts, but other guys not knowing is bliss.
Of course, but do you actually think that you were losing hair in your crown? I mean, did you get back home and then start doing the old double mirror kind of thing to try to see if you were losing hair in your crown? Because
honestly, I don't remember.
no,
I don't remember. I don't think I took it that seriously later.
Yeah, okay. Because I think some people are just cruel like that. They see the center of a crown whirl, they see a little bit of scalp through there, and they think that they're losing hair. You've seen guys over the forums send in pictures. You've probably had people contact you in the past. I know I have, who were saying, "Am I losing my hair?" Because you can see some scalp in the center of a whirl. So, but yeah, my first time I remember was in 1994 when I was 21. And I was on holiday in Ibiza, and I found that footage because you were the first guy to document his journey in terms of on a website. I don't know if I'm the first person that, I'm sure there's people out there who maybe with a home cine camera recorded their journey, but as you saw my footage from 1996, it was with a Sony camcorder, one of those handheld things that you buy, that had a high 8 tape that you'd put in, and I was holding that over the top of my head, recording, watching myself, because you had to connect it to your TV at the time. So I was watching myself on the TV whilst I was filming, holding this camera, and I was looking back at the image of it, and I called it that Back to the Plugs video. Obviously, it wasn't plugs; it was mini and micrographs, but it was a punchier title to call it plugs. And I just, the look on my face, and I could feel myself sweating because I was looking back at this thinking, how on earth is this going to look good? And that was the moment that dawned on me, where I made this terrible mistake. But it was on holiday in 1994 in Ibiza when I was told by a girl that I was losing my hair. And
God bless her.
Thank you very much. And that sent me into this spiral of just obsession, I guess.
Yeah.
And that lasted all through my 20s, this obsession about my hair. And it wasn't until I got it fixed in 2006 at the age of 33 at Hasson and Wong that I started to get over that. But it was 10 years of living with this horrible hairline that was unnatural. And you went through the same thing.
Yeah. And when you have that first repair, it's like a massive weight being lifted off of your shoulders. It's an amazing feeling. And, when I was dealing with it after my second surgery, I realized, I've said this before, but my first intelligent question was when I was in the chair for my second surgery. And I was in the chair for my second surgery because I told the doctor I wasn't really happy with my first surgery. And so he said, "Oh, come on back. We'll do some more." It's like, this very lackadaisical attitude. "Oh, come on. Yeah, come on back. We'll throw some more into it." It's like, "Oh, okay." And it doesn't, like, that's why I'm very, I'm very down on clinicians and doctors that gloss over the idea of doing a second surgery or even the first surgery as if it's just routine. And there is some routine to it, but it's not routine to the patient. And so I'm very cognizant when doctors act that way. But in this case, I did go back to my second surgery, and my first intelligent question was asked when I was in the chair, and I said, "What happens if I lose more hair?" And the doctor said, he looked me straight in the eye. He goes, "Oh, you're not going to lose more hair, and if you do, it won't be till you're 50 years old. And when that happens, you come see me then." Uh huh.
And
Yeah.
you were 22 at the time when that.
Yeah.
In
And,
the time
and
of
I
the
was
second
like,
surgery.
okay, something's not adding up here. But it's like, it's too late, you know? So I went home, suffered through the recovery, which was very bad back then. And I had 2 donor scars. First surgery, 1 donor scar. Second surgery, a second strip donor scar above the first one. So they were stacked 1 and 2, just like that. And the recovery finally, subsided to where I could actually function in public. And I largely forgot about it. Not forgot about it, but I largely put it out of my head after that, because it's like, I'm the kind of person, especially now, where it's like, well, what's done is done. I can't do anything about it, so I'll just carry on. And then in my work life, which throughout my 20s, my early and mid 20s consisted mainly of bartending at nicer restaurants, some not so nice, but I was never in a position where I could wear a hat. And as I got older, when I got to be about 25, I needed to wear a hat because the hairline kept receding. Surgical hairline was more and more exposed. I do remember when the natural hairline was right there at that line with the unnatural hairline. And I started to notice that it was noticeable. And then it got worse. And then by the time I was, in my late 20s, it was over. Like I had none of my original hair in the front. And then, the crown was opening up. I did not know about finasteride, which wasn't available when I first had my surgeries. I didn't learn about minoxidil until I was about 26, living in Atlanta, Georgia. And I forgot how I learned about it, but I tried it for about 6 weeks. It was messy. Didn't care for it, but I stopped it because I read the box on the side effects. How many times have we heard that? Wasn't having side effects, but I read about the side effects. I was like, thanks, no. And that was it. Comments were made from time to time about my hairline. I even had it mentioned in a sales meeting by one of my colleagues when we were having twice actually. Once in a sales meeting while we were having a debate, and he decided to use my hairline against me as a point of leverage to win his argument. That was fun. And then the second time in the same company, this new salesman came in, and he was trying to assert his dominance against the other top sales. I was number 2 sales in the company at the time, and in front of everyone, he says, "Hey Joe, I was wondering if you could tell me where could I get me some of them plugs like you got?" Out of nowhere. And it's like, and we're standing in the middle of the sales floor, and you could hear a pin drop. And I was just like, and I quickly grabbed myself together. I said, "Well, come on here. We'll talk about it." I told him about it just to, I was still in shock. And he goes, "Okay, yeah, all right. Good to know. Good to know." And that was it. And it shook me for about an hour. And then I went back in and kicked his ass on the sales floor. But there were different situations like that throughout my life over those 9 years. And what brought me to my repair journey was I'd gotten divorced, and living in my apartment by my new apartment with my TV on the floor, and the only piece of furniture I had was my futon, which is my couch and my bed. And I was watching TV late at night, and an infomercial came on late night for medical hair restoration, which in the States was a chain of clinics nationwide.
Okay.
And of course, it had the bald guy looking depressed. The announcer, is hair loss getting you down? You know, that kind of thing. Excuse me. And then, of course, after the transplant, he's got all his hair and he's driving a convertible. He's got, some, young woman next to
Chicks on
him.
his
It's
arm,
like,
yeah.
exactly.
Mm,
And I knew that was horseshit.
mm,
But I started to do some research. I was like, okay, let's see what's happened to this in the past 10 years. So this thing called a search engine was available to me. This, I don't know, you might have heard of it, Google. It's
nope,
very new at the time.
familiar.
And and that was the beginning of my journey. I met with the consultant at the time, local to my proximity in Seattle. Turned out to be a very good friend of mine, Mike Furco, still a friend of mine today. And he set me up, and he was very honest with me about everything. And he was actually so honest with me that when I left, I started thinking to myself, that guy just told me everything I wanted to hear. And I was like, aha, okay. Sleuthing mode activated. So I went online and joined, a couple of different forums as Jotronic. That was the birth of Jotronic. And I started asking, what do you know about this Hasson Wong outfit? Are they legit? And a couple of guys came forward and said, "Oh yeah, I had something done," or "Oh yeah, they have a good reputation." No one was sharing before and after photos.
Mm.
Everyone
was doing it very confidentially, weren't they? Everyone was
Yeah,
too embarrassed to show their
it,
pictures online. It
it,
just wasn't a thing.
but it was also tough to do
Yeah,
because
true.
digital cameras were a new thing. They were expensive as hell, and if you had photos, they were film. They were traditional. Developed the
And was
photographs
this about
from
2001? Was this about
yeah
2001? Yeah. Okay.
early is January 2002
Two.
actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Um, and so the consultant, Mike, he actually he used to read the forums and he saw me posting. He didn't know it was me, but he thought it might be. So he actually called me up and he said, "Are you Jotronic?" I'm like, "Huh?" He goes, "I'm reading online. Are you Jotronic?" I'm like, "I am." He goes, "Tell you what, are you busy this Saturday?" I'm like, "No." He goes, come back to the office at 12. I want you to meet some people.
Hmm.
He got some people together that were patients in the area. They agreed to come in, and I met 3 guys there. One that had just had it done, one that was like 6 months out, and one that was a year out. And I was like, "Those are hair transplants?" And they're like, "Yep." I was like, "I'm in. Sign me up."
Yeah.
And that was it. That was it. I had my surgery. I'll never forget driving up to, I went across the border. I'll never forget. I actually, it started to hit me what I was about to do. And all the years of angst and embarrassment and anxiety and stress and everything was starting to come out. I pulled over and I started weeping. Like I couldn't believe that I was about to get rid of this. And all that negativity was coming out. And I called my best friend back east. I'm like, "Am I making a mistake?" And he goes, "Dude, you've done your research." And he also had some bad. In fact, my bad surgery was his fault because he talked me into going with him for the consultation originally, 9 years prior. And he also had a bad outcome. But he's like, "Dude, you've done your research. We got messed up. These guys, you feel like they're legit. I say you go for it." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. I'll do it." So I gathered myself up, drove into Vancouver, and next morning I was in the chair, I was having surgery, and that's how it all got started.
Yeah, I can relate to what you were saying about the hairline because my hairline on my first surgery was placed behind my existing hairline at the time, and I remember the doctor came in very briefly and he drew this hairline, and it was almost like he kind of drew it, and then as he was leaving, he kind of like was walking out the room with the pencil still on my head, and it kind of like started here and went up here, so it was completely crooked. And I remember saying to him, "What was that?" And he's like, "That's your hairline," as he was gone because most of the work was carried out by his nurse. And it was probably a good, I don't know, good couple of centimeters at least from my existing hairline. And I remember thinking at the time, okay, well, I can't really see it. You can't really see what's happening. But as my native hairline crept back, and I remember that moment where I was like, whoa, what the are those things? These big, thick 4 hair grafts were suddenly in my hairline. And yeah, the moments of where I was in sales as well, and I'd go to people's houses, and I'd be presenting the company that I was working for. And I remember particularly this one where I sat quite close on a sofa, and this lady, she just kept on looking at my hairline, and it made me so uncomfortable. She was staring at my hairline. It made me feel that uncomfortable. And I just was like, I don't really care. I just want to get out of here, because this is not a great feeling that I had. And I couldn't wear hats. So same as you, I hated going to events where I couldn't just put my hat on, weddings and functions. And I was just, being so much more of a recluse. I didn't like being invited to things. I didn't like meeting new people. And I was always conscious of that people would, look at my hairline, or people would talk about me behind my back and say, oh yeah, David, he's got like a really bad hair transplant. Thankfully, no one called me out like they did directly with you. Everyone was far kinder with me, and nobody ever said to me, you've had a really bad hair transplant, haven't you? Because
Yeah.
I think the floor would have just opened up, and I would have just, I don't know what happened.
I think part of it is just the cultural difference in Britain at the time. It's like, oh, we don't want to embarrass him. It's like, it's keep it low key. Okay, we all see it, but no. In the States, it's like, dude, what's wrong with your hair?
Or maybe I was just a nice guy. People didn't want to upset me, Joe.
Or maybe they just don't want to upset you. Yeah. Yeah, like, well, Joe, he's an asshole. Let's, I don't care.
Give
But
him some shit.
What's interesting is something I've observed over the years, dealing with other patients is, and I realized this a long time ago, is that when you have a bad hair transplant, one of two things happens. Like if you're forced to live with it for an extended amount of time, and meaning years, like you did and I did, one of two things happens. You either adjust your personality to being outgoing, aggressive. I don't mean like in a negative way, just being the first to say, how do you do, and stick your hand out. Or you retreat into somewhat of a reclusive style of existence. And like you've seen it so many times where guys, they won't even take their hat off in the house because they just don't want to see. We've run into people who have not seen themselves in a mirror for 30 years because of their bad hair transplant or just their bad hair without surgery. So that's what it can do to you. I, on the other hand, overcompensated for my self-consciousness by being that guy that was, hey, how are you? Always looking them in the eye as if nothing was wrong. And hopefully I can get through it without someone saying something, or at least, making it obvious, or making obvious that it's obvious to them that I got this mess on my head. And, so I was able to work as a bartender and be engaging, and, restaurants where I have to, sell myself as I'm selling the food or what, the specials or whatever. And, so that's the one thing that I'm thankful for with my experience. That's the benefit that I got from being, compromised like that. I found a way around it. And so like now I can be on camera, I can be on stage in front of people, and I can speak to anyone. So I look at that as a benefit. That's the only good thing that came out of this. It allowed me to distract people by being kind of in their face, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. I didn't have that. I guess my job forced me to do that, but inside I
Yeah.
was kind of like crying, or
Oh, I was,
falling apart. So, but
yeah, me
I had
too.
to be that way because of the nature of my job. I couldn't hide,
Yeah.
and that was what was, I think, was so distressing me. And I don't think I ever dealt with that really. That point of being forced. It's like, and I guess it's sometimes I dream where I'm in an uncomfortable situation, and I think there's some trauma that's happened because of this hair transplant,
Hmm.
and because having to live that way, and just carrying on pretending that everything was all okay. And I in a social situation, I would be a bit more outgoing, and
Hmm.
like maybe and that obviously having a beer as well would always help. And
Oh, of course. Liquid courage,
ease
my friend.
yeah, exactly. Ease the pain. So I was always like turning to having some wine, having some beer, and so on, if I'm going to go out in a social situation, and kind of laughing it off. Maybe humor was always my deflection
Hmm. Yeah, of course.
process.
Of course. Yeah. I was the equivalent of the class clown,
Yeah.
post class in my early working life as well. But, it reminds me of the other kind of patient that's actually oblivious to the work that they've had, and they think everything looks fine and it looks terrible. And it reminds me of um, the movie. I think we've talked about this. The movie Cable Guy with
Cable
Jim
guy.
Carrey and
Yeah.
Matthew Broderick. I'll never forget that movie
Me neither.
because that's the first time I was in a movie theater, and the issue of this one guy's, Matthew Broderick's boss in this movie, his plug hair transplant, and it was obvious to everyone in the movie and all in the script, and they talk about it behind his back, and they show everyone when they're talking to him looking at his hairline, and then trying not to look at it, but they have to because it's there. And I remember thinking, I was so embarrassed. I love the movie, but I was so embarrassed, and that actually ruined it for me, to where it's like, oh my god, now it's in popular media, people are talking about it, and it's like that's going to bring more attention to me, you know. And yeah, I'll never forget that. That was a big moment for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember watching it as well, and I think it came out in about '96.
90,
Cable Guy.
96 or 97, I
Yeah,
think.
and
Yeah.
huge Jim Carrey fan.
Hmm.
Loved Dumb and Dumber. So like Cable Guy, it's a must. I went to the cinema
Of
to watch it.
course, it's like, yeah, wrong move. Yeah.
And I remember sitting there with my then girlfriend at the time, and who I hadn't told I had a hair transplant because I kept it totally
Of
quiet.
course.
In
Yeah,
fact,
I didn't tell anyone.
here's a story for you. I even used to share a flat with a guy and a friend of mine when I had my first hair transplant,
Mhm.
and I was given no post-op instructions.
And he told everyone. No.
No, no, he didn't know. He just wondered why I was wearing a baseball cap indoors
Yeah.
having dinner for a week. I wore a
Yeah.
cap for a week until they didn't shave my head. So they just basically transplanted these,
Yeah. Yeah.
million micrografts
Yeah. There was no
amongst,
shaving anything back
yeah,
then.
amongst existing hair. So you could actually hide it quite well. And I went back to work after a week. I remember the
Hmm.
intense pain. I went and stayed for a couple of days at my mum's place, and the pain, the headaches I was getting
Oh
from this,
yeah.
and the pain in the strip. Anyway, I wore a hat, but I went to the see Cable Guy with a girlfriend at the time, and I remember everyone. I looked at this thinking that guy's had a hair transplant, and I was deeply ashamed and I was hoping
Mm.
that she wasn't going to be able to notice that actually, that's, David, your hairline looks a bit like his as well.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It was good times. Good times.
Yeah, exactly. So just tell us a little bit more about so you went to Hasson and Wong, you
Hmm.
ended up working for them as a patient advisor within the
Hmm.
clinic. How many years were you there? Obviously you were there every day. You moved to Vancouver so you could
Hmm.
work at the clinic. So just tell us about I don't know, have you got any really memorable moments first of
Oh
all
God.
from your days at Hasson and Wong that you can recall for me?
Oh God. So many. Well, I was there for 11 years,
Okay.
and the first things I was doing when I got to the clinic was helping with the build out of the office, because there was no room for a new office. So they had a laser hair removal business next door. So they knocked out the wall, got rid of the laser machine, fired the 2 women that were there that just happened to be the wives of both doctors. They kicked them out, and they made my office there. And so then, being a nerd, I wired the entire office for networking with networking cable, because at the time they were transferring files between their computers using AOL email and floppy disks, the 1.44 megabit or megabyte floppy disks. So I built the network, and then I upgraded their audio visual in the ORs by hiring a contractor to do the install of LCD TVs, and I created a movie database through downloading a bunch of I don't know, like 50 different movies for people to consider. It might have been one of the first AV setups in the industry. It's nothing to brag about.
Was Cable Guy on the list?
What's that?
Was Cable Guy on the list of?
Actually, yeah, exactly. And I don't remember if he was on the list or not, but yeah. I don't think I would have put it on there just for that exact reason. Yeah, exactly. Obviously, but yeah, I mean, it was a lot of work. I was there like 16-hour days every day, and then also looking at the website and helping them to come up with a better design. I hired web designers because I'm not a web builder, but I'm a good producer. I understand what works, what looks good. And so I hired some people to do that and worked with them and got that going. And it was a huge improvement on the website. And then I started to standardize on the photographs because I started to notice some inconsistencies that led to a very big opinion on how photos should be taken across the board from all clinics and patients when documenting online. And that was the use of flash photography. Every photo had a flash. And I'm like, that doesn't look right. Like, I just met the patient. There he is in a photo. They look nothing alike. What's going on here? So did a bunch of research, physics of light and how it works with flash and what's going on with the hair. And I realized that when you're taking a photo of someone's hairline straight on, the flash from a camera is it's an extremely bright light. Very powerful, brighter than the sun, literally, when you're subjected to it so close. And what happens is it flattens the image, but it also creates a shadow of each hair follicle behind itself.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot more to it, but that makes the hairline look twice as thick. Concurrently, when you flip the patient around and they tilt their head back, and it's basically a 45-degree angle to the crown from the camera lens or from the flash. The flash is so powerful, it will wash out the finer hairs that are on that scalp tissue, and because it's bouncing off of the crown, and it makes it look thinner than it is in reality. So, and I even did an experiment at the time where I took a picture of my own crown before I had, all the work I had in it, where it was still pretty thin. And I took one photo, first photo with flash, second photo without flash, and I presented it online saying, hey, everyone, look at this result, 2,000 grafts after 8 months. And people are like, wow, that's great work. No, it's not. It's fake. And this is how I did it. And people were like, what? Oh my God. And that changed a lot. So anyway, that's a little bit about that. But, and then I just found myself answering questions long into the night. Like I'd be at the office. I had a key to the office, and sometimes I slept there. And I was there till 2, 3 in the morning, sometimes, on the computer, answering questions, explaining concepts of how things are done, lateral slit technique, trichophytic closure later on. The difference is in taking out a donor strip in segments as opposed to one long piece. The idea that tension in the donor area is variable
Variable,
from
yeah.
one area. Every 2 centimeters, it's tighter or looser than it was before or after, and how you need to adjust the width as you go along the back, and just all these little concepts that people never even, like, why would they think about? But things I was learning, and I made it a point my first few weeks there to spend time learning how to cut grafts under microscopes, because I wanted to learn everything about the surgery that I could by doing. And then I felt like I'd be in a position where I can explain how these things are done, because I knew I learned how to do it myself. So that was like the first 6 months of me at the clinic. And a lot of that continued throughout. I did eventually reduce my time there, because it's like you can only work that many hours a day for so long. But I would go in, like, first thing I'd do after saying hi to everyone, I made it a point to say hello to everyone in the clinic, every OR, all that, every morning, walk through, say hello. And then after I set things down, I make sure I go check emails, make sure there's no emergencies going on, and I go straight into the OR. And I'd sit there for minimum half hour just to see what's going on, watch, observe, ask questions, because I loved learning about the surgery. And those are very valuable points of my career, where I was able to learn about the surgery from the experts out of desire, not out of any sort of idea that I had to, just so I could understand what was going on. I wanted to understand what was going on.
Yeah, well, what I've always noticed about you always, like, you've had a real thirst for knowledge, and you've always wanted to know every detail about everything, whether that's buying a new camera, or it's
Yeah.
everything. So I've always known that about you, and your detail. I remember in talking to you about the process. So when we first had our consultation, and I saw your results, I was too was blown away by it. This can't be real. This isn't a real hair transplant. I was half expecting to turn up at Hasson Wong and meet, and you were going to be, I don't know, not a real person, or you're going to be coming in wearing a wig or something.
I was accused of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Which
I
is
guess.
funny.
But yeah, so I was just blown away by the results that they were documenting at the time that they were producing. And didn't Victor Hasson take about loads of patients to a conference at one time? I seem to remember a
Yeah, that was in
story.
2004. Yeah,
Yeah.
the ISHRS World Conference was in Vancouver,
Mhm.
and up until that time, I had made it a point for us to be front and center publicly on the various hair loss boards, and I became kind of like the face of the company at that point, because I was always engaging, not just with patients, but with doctors, and debating them about the merits of different ideology, and concepts, and surgical methods and stuff like this. And like, yeah, a lot of people didn't like me, but I believed in everything I was saying, and I stand by everything I was saying back then today, as far as, like, the basics of how things happen, and what's better, what's not. But we were getting a lot of flack because we were doing bigger surgeries, higher densities, and a lot of people were saying, more behind the scenes, but even publicly, that it was smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. I
So
remember that.
so credit to Dr. Hasson. He actually said, okay, well, next year, at the previous year, the meeting was in Chicago, and he got into a debate where someone said, it's smoke and mirrors, and he says, okay, come to Vancouver next year, and we'll show you the smoke and mirrors. We'll have, I forgot what he said, 20 patients or whatever. I forgot how many we actually had, but we had at least 20 patients, or maybe it was more. It's 21 years ago, Jesus Christ. But it might have been more. Maybe it was 30 patients. But we worked hard to get all those patients there. We flew them in from all over North America, paid for their hotel, and said, all you got to do is show up. And it blew everyone away. Like, all of the critics were like, they're like, wow.
I don't think anyone has ever done that since. I know that people bring the
No.
one or two patients and so on, but
No.
I think anyone's brought that number of
And no one will
patients.
talk about it either, because 20 years ago, we were showing the bigger cases, 5,000 grafts, some cases, densities of 80 per square centimeter, which is unheard of. And it did put us on the map as far as like the credibility amongst the peers. It didn't change anything online because, patients were still coming to us because of what we were showing. And we were being, very diligent with showing our results. In fact, I'd hired a audio video guy, and he was actually our web guy that was working in house. But he and I learned together about digital videography. And back then, there was no hard drives in our camcorders. It was only tape, but it was digital tape. And so, long story short, I convinced the doctors to invest in good equipment, some sort of Canon HD camcorder. I forgot what it was, but we set up the standards for photographs already. We were already known for that, which was what I put together, which is basically the standard for how most clinics do it now. But then I had the idea of video, and I realized back in 2003, actually, that video was the future. And so I got the clinic to invest properly. And my colleague and I, Tom, we cranked out one video every week for 52 weeks straight. And it was called Hasson Wong HD Video Fridays. It was no one had ever thought of it before. No one had ever attempted it before. And we did it. And it doesn't sound like a big deal now, but back then it took a week just to process it. Because just to offload the tape, it was offloaded in real time. So if you had, a 20-minute video, it took 20 minutes to offload it to your PC. And then for that PC to be able to process all that data, that took a while, man. It was not easy. But we did it. And on time, every Friday, we had a new video where we're doing a comb through. We pioneered that. Showing the donor scar, which I said we need to do this to show the outcomes of the donor area because everyone's asking about it. No one was doing that.
Yeah.
Whole 9 yards. And that's what really put us on the map for the patients. And
I remember myself in 2005 when I was researching is that, all roads kind of led to Hasson and Wong. From my point of view, they had the best documented results. They had the most patients sharing their experiences on the hair loss forums. And it felt like a community very much at that time where you felt supported. And that's how I did my research through your own website as well. And that's why when I had my hair transplant in the 1st of June, 2006 it was, I documented my results online, and that's how our relationship then kind of became even more parallel, because then I think I documented it, but that you saw the change in me from the photographs, because I went traveling in 2009, I think it was. So it's a few years actually, and you reached out and said, we need a guy to be our UK representative for Hasson and Wong, and I was like, yeah, great, and I said this before, is that, and I said, I really enjoyed helping those patients, answering those questions, and it was something that I hadn't really spoken about myself because I kept it so quiet. And I told you I didn't even tell my flatmate. I had this hair transplant. I just put a cap on, and he must have thought.
I remember you being kind of I don't know. You seemed uneasy about being public about it at first.
Yeah, no, I was, and all my documentation on the forums was all, basically
anonymous,
from my eyebrows up, and I didn't want my face on there because I guess because of my job, and that all changed. But I remember saying, well, I'll do it, but I don't want anyone to know my real name. I don't want anyone to see my face and so on. I still had this big hang up about the hair transplants, and I think that was down to having this repair, and because I think it's you can owning having a hair transplant when you've had a successful outcome is one thing, but people knowing that you've spent money, you've had 3 transplants, you've got this ridiculously unnatural looking hairline, sparse coverage everywhere, I just couldn't own that, so I didn't want people to know. But going back to how I chose Hasson and Wong was obviously because of you, because of the documentation,
Hmm.
because of the results, and
Hmm.
I didn't look back after having that first
Yeah.
repair.
Yeah. I remember when you came over for your consultation and realizing that you were the first patient I met where your journey was almost identical to my
Mm.
own. And that's what initially got us to strike up a friendship, of course. And of course, me being a fantastic guy, like you wouldn't leave me alone. I remember that. So
Yeah, I remember following you around Vancouver, just
yeah,
like,
you
hey,
wouldn't leave me
Joe,
alone.
Joe, Joe,
Over here, hey Joe. No, it was great.
Jotronic.
I really enjoyed having you over as a patient, and I'm glad that we became friends afterwards. But and then you came on board as the official representative for the company. But by the time 2014 had come around, for me, it was time to move on. Um,
And why was that? What was the reason, if you don't mind going into that? What was the feeling about why you needed to move on at that time?
I was being approached by other clinics, and this was when FUE was finally getting its traction around 2009, 2010. I made the conscious announcement actually to my superiors, Jerry Wong and Victor Hasson. I was no longer going to be speaking ill of FUE as a technique because I was seeing too many good results from the competition, and it would not be fair. And then, frankly, it would make us look stupid to continue to put our head in the sand, because it was coming. Like at the time, the clinic was top of the world,
As an
doing
FUT clinic, of course,
as
because
a
yeah,
strip
they
clinic,
weren't
of
doing,
course.
yeah.
And there was great resistance, more from one than the other, but there was a great resistance. And I saw the writing on the wall. I didn't want to, I wasn't going to, fight to my last breath, on the hill for strip. It was obvious, like the results were coming out, from some clinics that were not just really good, but like consistently. And that's what matters. Like everyone can have a home run every once in a while, but if you're doing it, day in, day out, where every time you post a result, it's like, it looks like good growth. It's, natural. And so, yeah. And so for the next year, I was trying to get them. It's like, let's do this. Let's do this. And by the time I left, it was to go to another clinic and head up their FUE efforts,
Can I
their
just
outreach.
interrupt you there? Because I think that the from Hassan and Wong's point, because I was around at that time, obviously
Mm-hmm.
working within the clinic, is that I think there was an element of with strip, FUT, you need a big team, and I think that they felt by moving over to an FUE model that they would have to let some of the techs go, or I think there was an element of that. But I do remember they brought the Artist machine.
That
Um,
was after. That was after I left.
well,
Yeah,
it was after you left, okay, because
that was
that was
after I
in an
left.
effort to try to get into FUE, and I think it just sat there gathering dust because I think it
Well,
was
I,
barely ever
I I know
used.
I know the story why it sat there gathering dust. I won't get into that because
Mhm.
it doesn't need to be shared. But
Yep.
um, I will say that it was a knee jerk reaction for them to buy that because it was after I left.
Right. Okay.
Um, it's like, oh, okay, well maybe we should do FUE. It's like, okay, he could have made that decision before I left, but I mean it was for the best. And I went to work for Dr. Rahal in Ontario. I flew out there and I trained with the clinic for a few weeks. Good doctor, good team. Really, I love the facility. It was really nice. He had a great vision for the future of his clinic, where he has on-site overnight facilities. Um, really well done. Dr. Rahal, even to this day, he's class act and does.
The hairline king, as he is called,
Yeah, I don't know if he's still called that, but yeah,
No.
I mean, that was that was one of the lines that they were using at the time. But time went on. I wasn't there for very long because I started to realize, being a consultant, um, I'm tired of it. Like you can only do it for so long, and I got tired of the same finasteride questions day in and day out. It's like, gouge my eyes out with a spoon. That I'd rather do that than listen to more finasteride questions. And there's a little bit of burnout there, but it was a lack of upward mobility for my career. There were plans for expansion in ways I won't get into that did seem attractive, but I just realized, it felt like a lateral move as opposed to a move up. And, nothing against Raw Clinic for that. They told me what it was going to be, and I agreed to it. But then I got into it. It's like, you know what, this isn't actually what I want to do. So that's what led me into my independent role, where I'm able to work with multiple clinics and use my experience to help to better their clinics. I've not been doing consultations for any of these clinics. It's just a matter of explaining to the public, my subscribers, followers, people that pay attention to what I say for whatever reason, why I like particular clinics. I use my background, my standards for myself when I'm looking at different clinics, and that's turned out to be the right direction for me. Where, on the front side, the public facing side, I got my YouTube channel and I talk about these clinics, but on the back end, I'm actually using my experience in marketing and just the business itself on how to do things better. I look at their internal operations. I look at maybe their advertising, like maybe you shouldn't say this. Maybe you can come at it from a different direction where it's more of an ethical transparency type of thing, because I believe in the power of transparency. If you're telling people what to expect realistically, instead of saying it's like a day at the spa, then they'll actually come, because they recognize that you're being honest about it. And if you're being honest about that, then maybe you've got very little to hide.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch to it, but the clinics that are with me, they found it the ones that listen to me, they find it to be valuable, and it's helped their business. So that's what I've been doing for the past 10 years, is helping the clinics to be better at what they do, and how they treat their patients. I've helped some clinics actually improve their surgical outcomes as well. But for them to actually be working with me, they have to be pretty good to begin with. I just fine tune things for them.
And so that was 2015 that you
Mhm.
started out your YouTube channel. Can you remember the first video that you put up? What was that about?
Well, the channel actually started in 2006, and I was using it to display
Okay.
Hasson and Wong content.
Right.
Like very early on, I built it when YouTube started. I think
But you weren't getting lots of traction at that time, though. I don't think really.
No.
It was
No.
when you started to go independent. I remember I remember that all happening because we spent a lot of time, because you leaving Hasson and Wong opened a door for me to become the main kind of guy at Hasson and Wong that was online, that was known.
Yeah.
And my role increased. I kind of took on your role, which I guess must have been strange, because I was
No,
over
you did a
in
fine job of it too.
yeah, I was over in Vancouver, and we spent many a evening chatting through
Yeah, it was fun.
things
It was fun having you here for sure.
over a beer. And yeah, but I remember your videos, that they were you were one of the first people that I knew of. I'm sure there were some other people doing these educational videos, but I remember you were one of the first guys that was doing these educational videos on YouTube. And that's how the hair transplant mentor was born.
Yeah. The current version of that. Because I had the website, my hair transplant mentor website, for years before that. That grew out of my original Yahoo website from my first surgery. I bought the domain probably 20 years ago, actually, and had like the current version of the website's like version 6.0. But the first video, I don't remember what the first one was, but one of the first ones was hair transplant class number 1, do not have a hair transplant. And that exploded. I think now it's got like 700,000 views. six or 700,000 views, but it was the first of my new format where I'm educating with the truth, like raw. And that set the tone for my hair transplant class series. And then, here I am going to this clinic. This is what I like about the clinic, that kind of thing. And then eventually actually around the same time, 2015, started becoming the co-host and the permanent co-host on The Bald Truth with Spencer Coburn, which has been going on for 10 years now. Like, he's been on the air for almost 30 years, but brought me on 10 years ago. And I stream that from my channel.
Spencer was only 40.
Yeah. No, only 50. But he's only 50. Yeah.